Welcome to Moonlit Romantic, where every story is a quiet escape, and love always finds its way in the stillness. Tonight's tale is Snowed In With You. High in the winter mountains, a wedding planner determined to keep her heart closed finds herself stranded by a snowstorm with the bride's gruff older brother, who doesn't believe in fairy tales. But when the snow falls thick and the fire burns low, strangers can become something more, and two guarded hearts might just thaw. So pour yourself something warm, settle under the covers, and let the story begin. Chapter 1. The Mountain Lodge. The mountains had a way of swallowing sound, wrapping the world in a hush so deep it felt almost sacred. Harper Lane sat in the back seat of the hired SUV, her phone balanced on her knee, scrolling through the latest version of the seating chart. Outside, snowflakes drifted lazily against a backdrop of evergreens, dusted white. The kind of winter scene her wedding clients dreamed about. Her current bride, Margot Foster, was one of them. A New Year's Eve ceremony, a roaring stone fireplace, candlelight catching crystal, and snow falling outside in picture-perfect silence. Harper could already see it. The kind of wedding that would fill her portfolio and keep her booked for years. What she could not see, what she refused to see, was herself in any of it. She designed love stories. She did not live them. Her heart was a closed-door office with a by-appointment-only sign no one could seem to meet the requirements for. The driver slowed as the lodge came into view. It rose from the snow like something pulled from the pages of a storybook. 3 stories of timber and stone. Its wide porch lined with rocking chairs, now buried in white. Smoke curled from the chimney. Warm light glowed in the tall windows, spilling onto the drifts outside. Harper gathered her bag and stepped into the crisp air. The scent of pine and wood smoke greeted her first, followed by the muffled crunch of her boots in the snow. Inside, the heat wrapped around her like a blanket. The front desk clerk looked up from a ledger and smiled. "Welcome to Pine Hollow Lodge. You must be here for the Foster wedding?" "That's right," Harper said, returning the smile. Harper Lane, wedding planner. The bride should be arriving tomorrow morning. The clerk's smile faltered slightly. "About that, there's a storm moving in tonight. Your bride called. Her flight was grounded in Denver. She may not make it until the day after tomorrow." Harper's mind instantly shifted to logistics, timelines, deliveries, rescheduling the tasting. "All right," she said briskly. "I'll use the extra day to check the decor and meet with the vendors." The clerk nodded toward the large stone fireplace dominating the lobby. "You might also want to enjoy the downtime while you have it. There's cocoa by the fire." Harper gave a polite nod, but she was already pulling her planner from her bag. She crossed the lobby, too focused on the list forming in her head to notice the man coming in from the porch, until the door swung wide and a gust of cold air rushed past. He was tall, shoulders broad beneath a dark sweater, snow dusting the ends of his hair. His gaze swept the room in a way that felt both casual and assessing. When his eyes landed on her, they narrowed just slightly. Harper Lane? He asked, his voice deep, carrying a note of skepticism. Yes, she said cautiously. And you are? Liam Foster. The name clicked instantly. Margot's older brother. He'd been little more than a voice on the phone when she'd coordinated some family-related details for the wedding. Harper remembered clipped answers, practical questions, and the faintest hint of amusement when she'd explained the floral arrangements. Margot mentioned you, Harper said carefully. He set down a small duffel and brushed the snow from his sleeves. She mentioned you too, said you were the best in the business. His tone made it sound like a challenge. Harper arched a brow. Is that skepticism I hear? Let's just say I'm not convinced people need a small army to get married. Her professional smile didn't waver, but her spine straightened. And I'm guessing you don't believe in happily ever afters either. He shrugged. I believe in people being honest about what they're signing up for. A retort hovered on her tongue, but she bit it back. No use getting into it, with the bride's brother on day one. Well, I'll be here, making sure your sister's day is perfect. You're welcome to stay out of my way. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. We'll see. The storm arrived that evening exactly as predicted. Harper sat in the great room by the fire, laptop open, running through her checklists. Outside, the snow fell thicker, swirling under the lodge lights, until the world beyond the windows blurred into a white curtain. Guests drifted in and out, wrapped in scarves and carrying steaming mugs. Liam was among them, settling into the armchair across from her with a book in hand. He didn't say a word, but she could feel his presence, solid, quiet, impossible to ignore. She told herself it was just the fact that he was Margot's brother, and therefore a key player in this wedding's success. When the power flickered later that night, the lodge's generator kicked in, the lights dimming but holding steady. Harper glanced toward the windows. Snow was piling high against the porch railings. The roads would be impassable by morning. She closed her laptop, an unfamiliar flutter moving through her chest. It wasn't the storm itself. It was the sudden realization that she might be stuck here in this quiet mountain lodge with Liam Foster, and for reasons she didn't care to examine yet, she wasn't entirely sure that was a bad thing. Chapter 2, Snowbound. Morning arrived like a held breath. Harper woke to the sound of silence, the kind that exists only when snow has laid its careful hand over everything. From her window, the world was a watercolor of white and pine. The lodge roofs wearing soft crowns. The paths erased as if the night had decided to start over. Her phone chimed with a message from Margot, grounded again. Earliest arrival is the day after tomorrow. Please don't panic. There was a snowflake emoji, then another, then a heart. Harper smiled despite herself, and typed back assurances she knew how to keep. She had built a career out of delivering calm where storms tried to move in. Downstairs, the fire held a steady heart of ember and flame. The great room smelled of coffee and cedar. A few guests had gathered in wool socks and knit sweaters, already telling storm stories, as people do when weather makes companions of strangers. Harper sat up at a low table with a stack of notes. The florist was in town and blocked by closed roads. The string quartet would not risk the climb. The bakery said they would bake through the night as soon as plows freed the main streets. "Looks like your army is snowed in," Liam said mildly. He had appeared with a mug in each hand, steam curling into the air between them. He set one down near her notebook without fanfare. Cinnamon rose to meet her. She didn't ask how he knew she took it that way. "It's a pause, not a defeat," she said, accepting the cup. "I can pivot." "I do not doubt you can pivot," he said, settling into the chair opposite. "I'm curious why you have to." "Because weddings are a choreography," Harper replied, warming her fingers on the mug. "If one partner changes tempo, everyone else has to feel the shift." He considered that, then nodded. "Fair." She tipped her chin. "And you?" "How is the practical brother handling an impractical storm?" "I brought a book and low expectations," he said. "Both are useful in weather and in life." "Low expectations?" she echoed, arching a brow. "They protect you from disappointment," he said easily. "They protect you from joy," she returned. His mouth curved. "You sell joy for a living. I maintain equipment, so buildings do not surprise people with leaks and failed thermostats. We may simply be speaking from opposite rooftops." "And yet here we are," she said, gesturing at the shared table, the shared morning, on the same porch. He looked at her over the rim of his mug, and for a heartbeat, the teasing softened into something like recognition. Then a door opened, and cold air and laughter spilled in. The moment folded itself away, polite and intact. By midday, the storm had drawn closer to the windows, thickening until the trees were silhouettes, and the world felt like a snow globe someone had set gently on a shelf. The lodge staff organized a cocoa bar near the fire, bowls of marshmallows, cinnamon sticks, a jar of peppermint shards. Harper resisted for a respectable minute, and then surrendered to the small comfort, stirring her cup until a sweet drift melted on top. She reviewed floor plans, penciling alternative ceremony spots in the margin. The hearth as altar, candles in hurricane glass, chairs arranged in gentle curves so even the shyest guest would feel held. The more she adjusted, the more the picture sharpened. Not a compromise, but a different kind of right. Liam watched her draw. "You are not undoing anything," he observed. "You're translating it." "That is all planning is," she said. "Translating a heart into a room." He was quiet a beat. "That is a very good sentence." She glanced up, careful. "Compliments are a gateway drug." "To what?" he asked. "To believing," she said lightly. He leaned back, a smile tugging at one corner of his mouth, and there it is. The afternoon stretched like a cat by the fire. Someone built a puzzle on the far table. A pair of teenagers played chess and laughed when the pieces tumbled from a wobbly board. The storm kept them all in a soft parenthesis, and no one seemed eager to close it. Harper's phone buzzed with a weather alert. Then another text from Margot. "Liam there? Keep him from overthinking everything. Love you." Harper looked up to find the man in question, balancing a stack of extra logs on his shoulder, like it was no labor at all. He lowered them into the wood bin, his movements easy, efficient, the kind that spoke of someone who fixed what he could and did not complain about what he could not. "You missed your calling," she said when he returned. "You could be an innkeeper." "I like machines," he said. "They are honest. They do what they are built to do unless something breaks. People," he lifted a hand in a gentle shrug, "people are more interpretive." "You mean complicated." "I mean improvisational." She laughed. "Spoken like a man who believes love is a leaked pipe waiting to happen. And spoken like a woman who believes love is a room you can design so no one spills." "Not no one," she said. "Just fewer spills, and towels at the ready." They fell into a comfortable quiet that surprised her. He read, she made notes. When the logs settled and the fire exhaled, he rose to add another. When her pencil rolled toward the edge of the table, he caught it without looking. The smallest choreography made the largest sense. By evening, the kitchen announced a stew on the house for snowed-in guests. Hearty bowls arrived on trays, fragrant with thyme and a hint of wine. Harper carried hers to the fire and found Liam already there, saving a seat by the simple expedient of leaving his book in it. He moved the book without being told. They ate, and the last chill from the door lost its grip on the room. Outside, the storm softened from insistent to steady. The windows filmed with frost, turning the night into a blurred jewel. Harper felt something inside her do the same, edges rounding, light admitting itself without argument. "I will give you this," Liam said when their bowls were nearly empty. "You and your army may very well make something beautiful out of this lockdown." "I do not need an army," she said, a little too fast. "Just a plan, and people willing to be kind to the plan when weather gets ideas." "And you," he said. She looked down into her bowl, then up, then down again. "And me," she conceded. Later, long after the puzzle found its last piece and the chess game declared truce, Harper stood at the tall window and watched snow ghost across the porch. The glass held the faintest reflection, her and behind her the fire, and a figure approaching with 2 mugs. "Truce?" Liam asked, offering one. "Over what?" "Over everything we decided we disagreed about." She took the mug. "Truce," she said, and found that the word fit warmly in her mouth. They stood side by side, not speaking. The snow fell and fell. The lodge breathed and settled. Harper sipped and let herself imagine a ceremony by this very hearth, vows rising like heat, love made possible by blankets, and patience and a storm that moved people closer. She did not look at Liam. She did not need to. She could feel the space between them, knitting itself into something less like argument and more like room. Chapter 3. Ember Hours. By the second morning, the world had graduated from hushed to muffled. Snowbanks leaned against the porch rails like tired giants. A plow had sighed past before dawn and vanished, leaving a single carved path down the mountain road that looked more suggestion than certainty. The clerk at the front desk declared the highway still closed. People accepted it with the contentment of those who have already committed to a snow day. The lodge staff announced indoor diversions on a chalkboard, cookie decorating, a short lesson in tying fly fishing knots, a hot cocoa tasting with a debate about marshmallows versus whipped cream. Harper circled cocoa and underlined it, then pretended she had done so professionally. Liam circled it too, as if attending were a matter of public safety. They met at a long farm table in the smaller lounge where windows framed drifts so tall they turned the world into soft hills. A woman from the kitchen cheerfully set out steaming carafes and little bowls of spices. The group made a half circle, and Harper found herself next to Liam, their elbows almost, but not quite, brushing. "Whipped cream," he declared, when prompted with the confidence of a man issuing a weather report. "Marshmallows," she returned, as if staking a claim. "Compromise," the kitchen woman said, plopping both in each of their cups, and the group applauded as if a treaty had been signed. They sipped and compared and argued amiably about cinnamon versus nutmeg, peppermint shards versus orange peel. At some point, the conversation drifted to winter traditions. One guest told a story about skating by moonlight on a lake so clear you could see the fish sleeping under your feet. Another described a childhood ritual of writing worries on scraps of paper and feeding them to the first fire of the year. Harper listened, the warmth of community seeping in like heat through a wall. When her turn came, she hesitated. She had 100 stories about weddings in winter, about bridesmaids laughing breath into the cold, about rings warmed in pockets, about a grandparent's knit scarf draped over a chair like a benediction. But the one that stepped forward was much older and smaller. "My mother and I used to bake gingerbread on the first snow," she said. "We made too much icing and not enough patience. The house smelled like clove and sugar for 2 days." Liam looked at her as if she had set something fragile on the table and asked the room to keep it safe. "What happened to the gingerbread?" he asked softly. "We ate the heads off first," she said, and the table laughed. Then quieter, "We stopped when she got sick." A small pause, respectful, held its breath and passed. "Then we should make some," he said simply. Later, "If the kitchen will trade us flour for good behavior." She found herself nodding. Through the afternoon, the lodge settled into that peaceful hum, particular to places where everyone has surrendered to the same slower clock. Harper walked the quiet hallways to check the small reception rooms again, taking measurements she did not strictly need. She found herself imagining Margot's bouquet by the frosted window, the gentle flare of laughter when vows make even the resolute believers shy. She pictured Liam at the back of the room, where practical brothers stand to keep an eye on doors and feelings. She imagined him softening, not because of the ritual, but because his sister's face would do that to anyone who loved her. She turned a corner and nearly ran into him. He steadied her with 2 warm hands, and a quick intake of breath that made the moment feel less like a collision and more like a small rescue. "Measuring the future?" he asked. "Measuring the room," she said. But she was smiling and he saw it. "Come see something," he said, tipping his head toward a service corridor. "I made a friend." The friend turned out to be the lodge's temperamental boiler, which hummed now with a purr that suggested it had been persuaded rather than bullied. Liam explained a bit about valves and air in the line, the language of a man who likes when machines keep their promises. Harper listened, genuinely charmed by the way he talked to metal like a colleague. "You keep the heat steady," she said when he finished. "I keep the candles lit. Between us, winter does not stand a chance." "That sounds like a proposal," he said, amused. "Do not get ideas," she returned, equally amused, and the banter threaded warmth through the thin hallway. Back in the great room, dusk pressed its face to the windows, insisting it had arrived early and would not be argued with. The storm had gentled into long, steady strands. The world beyond the glass blurred and softened and leaned in. Someone began a firelight sing-along, the kind with old songs that remember everyone's voice, even when no one remembers all the words. Harper stood by the hearth with a mug and let the music fill the small hollows that stress leaves when it departs. Liam joined her, shoulder to shoulder, not touching. They watched the flames lay their amber over pine and wool and smiling eyes. "I may have been wrong about one thing," he said after a while. "Only one," she teased. He accepted the jab. "About planning. Maybe it does not remove risk. Maybe it makes room for grace." She turned to him, surprised by how precisely his words suited the space inside her. "That is exactly it." He nodded, gaze on the fire. "I do not dislike weddings," he admitted, the confession wearing the plain coat of truth. "I dislike promises made carelessly. But watching you work, I can see how a careful promise might matter." She looked at him then, properly, and found that something in her loosened, as if a ribbon had been untied. "Careful promises are my specialty," she said gently. "They are not less romantic. Sometimes they are more." He exhaled, a quiet, almost relieved sound. The room around them faded to murmurs. The fire whispered. The storm signed its name on the windows one more time. "Gingerbread?" he asked. "Gingerbread," she confirmed. They made it in the kitchen with the blessing of the night cook and a promise to clean the counters perfectly. Liam followed her instructions, the way he approached everything else, with intent and respect, and an occasional mischievous aside that made her laugh at the exact moment the flour threatened to puff. They ate the first cookie, standing by the prep table. It tasted like clove and allspice, and childhood trying again. Harper looked at him with gratitude that felt larger than the room. "For the record," he said, mouth full, "heads first is chaos. Feet first is strategy." "You are not invited to the cookie ethics panel," she said, bumping his shoulder with her own. By the time the kitchen lights dimmed and they washed the last bowl, the storm had settled into the kind of snow that makes sleep a foregone conclusion. They walked the hallway together, their steps unhurried. At her door, he paused. That almost smile softened into something that asked and did not insist. "Good night, Harper." "Good night, Liam." He hesitated, then added, "For what it is worth, I am glad my sister hired a planner who believes in careful promises." "For what it is worth," she said, feeling the truth warm in her chest. Like cinnamon, I am glad her brother believes in warmth that stays. They did not touch. They did not need to. The ember hours had done their work. Chapter 4. Roads, clear and otherwise. Morning broke brighter. The sky was a clean slate, blue written across it in a careful hand. Snow still sat high along the porch railings, but the path the plow had carved now looked like a road instead of a rumor. The front desk relayed the best news of the week. The highway would reopen by afternoon. Flights would resume. The world beyond the lodge had found itself again. Harper stood by the window with her first cup of coffee and let relief and reluctance coexist. The timing would be tight, but the wedding could go on, adjusted, translated, made new. She checked her messages. Margot's text sang, "On my way. You are a wonder. Tell my brother to breathe." A snowflake. A ring. 3 hearts. Harper wrote back, "Breathe en route. We are ready." She found Liam by the hearth, feeding a small log to a complacent fire. He looked up, the simple pleasure of flames reflecting in his eyes. "Your sister is in the air," Harper said. "We have a road. We have a day." He nodded once, a practical man's benediction. "Then we should give it a good one." They moved through the morning in tandem. Harper finished her translations, chairs curved to catch warmth, greenery tucked low so candles could do their best work, a small bowl of pine cones on the table, where gifts would land as if by snow. Liam checked with the staff about the generator, the water line, the temperamental boiler. Every time Harper turned around, something heavy had been lifted by a person who looked suspiciously like him. And every time she tried to thank him, he managed to make it sound like he had only been walking in the right direction when the weight needed moving. Margot swept in by late afternoon in a glow of gratitude and travel grit. She hugged Harper with the relief of a woman who had trusted the right person and been proven correct. Then she hugged her brother, who bore it like a tree bears a friendly storm. "You two okay?" Margot asked, eyes bright with sisterly interest. "We made gingerbread," Harper said. "We fixed a boiler," Liam added. Margot's smile widened. "That is the best sentence I have heard this week." The ceremony happened at the exact right hour for the light to find the windows and lay itself down the center aisle. The florist, freed by a miracle of timing, arrived with an armful of winter green and white blooms that looked like the quietest part of the forest had agreed to be a bouquet. The bakery delivered a cake that managed to be both elegant and sensible, tall enough to feel like celebration and sturdy enough to trust. Guests arrived in wool and wonder. The string quartet could not make it, but a pianist who had escaped the city played with a touch like hot tea, soothing, present, exactly warm enough. Harper watched it all breathe into place, not as a magician watching a trick, but as a gardener, seeing blossoms open because weather and timing had finally agreed to be kind on the same day. She caught Liam's gaze at the back of the room. He tipped his head in a gesture so small it could have been wind and so sincere it could only be assent. When Margot walked down the aisle, his eyes shone with uncomplicated love. Harper felt it move through her, steadying something that had always wanted this proof. The vows were careful promises, clearly spoken, softly held. When applause rose, like birds startled and then delighted, Harper let herself exhale the kind of breath she usually saved for when a day is entirely done. The room felt good, better than good. It felt honest. The reception unfolded with the comfortable grace of people who had already weathered something together and found they liked who they were on the other side. There was laughter without edge, toasts that remembered restraint. Harper drifted at the perimeter as she always did, ready for any small rescue a moment might require. None were needed. The room had learned to take care of itself. She felt him before she saw him. Liam appeared at her shoulder with 2 small plates, slivers of cake, and a handful of sugared cranberries. For the planner, he said. Fuel. For the boiler whisperer, she returned. Gratitude. They ate their cake like conspirators, pleased with their heist of a good day. Music spun quietly behind them. People who did not usually dance found that their feet had learned overnight how to be gentler than their minds. Tell me your rule again, Liam said, not quite facing her, the plates balanced in his capable hands. Love is for clients, not for you. She considered the frosted window, the room, the warmth that had taken up residence between her ribs. I used to keep that rule, she said. It made my work easier. It made everything else smaller. And now? Now I have a counter-proposal, she said. Love is for people who show up with firewood and gingerbread and low expectations that learn better. He laughed softly, a sound she knew she would want to hear again. That seems dangerously specific. She turned to him. I do not have time for vague. He met her gaze, and there it was again. The simple, steady relief of a truth that fits. I do not know what happens next, he said, because he did not pretend to know the future. But I would like to find out with you, without selling anything, without breaking anything, with towels at the ready. Careful promises, she said. Careful promises, he agreed. They did not kiss there in the echo of vows and clinking glasses. They did not need to fold their beginning into someone else's ending. Instead, they stood shoulder to shoulder and watched Margot dance with the person she had chosen. And Harper thought that perhaps the best love stories did not require spectacle, only consent and kindness, and a storm to slow everyone down enough to notice. Late that night, when the last candle wore a small crown of its own smoke and guests wandered off to rooms where window panes still held the ghost of frost, Harper slipped out to the porch. The snow glittered under a clear sky. Stars hung close, as if they had grown fond of the roofline. Footsteps crunched beside hers. Liam arrived with 2 mugs because of course he did. 2 gingerbread, he said. 2 boilers, she replied. 2 careful promises, and the courage to keep them, he added, lifting his mug. To not planning absolutely everything, she said, surprised at how easily the words came. They stood together, breathing fog into the cold and watching it disappear. After a while, she shifted, turning toward him. He understood without instruction. His free hand found hers, warm even through the bite of winter. Harper, he said, and her name in his voice sounded like the simplest wish. Will you let me call when the roads are clear and keep calling when they are not? Yes, she said, because she had already decided, quietly in the ember hours. And when you forget to call, I will remind you, kindly. Truce and treaty, he said. Both, she agreed. The kiss they shared then was unhurried and honest, held in the shelter of a porch that had watched a storm come and go, and had learned perhaps that weather is not the only thing with the power to change a room. It tasted faintly of sugar and cocoa, and the relief of no longer pretending not to want what you want. When they parted, the night had grown a shade deeper, and the stars seemed to approve. They finished their cocoa. They finished the day. They said good night with the ease of people who had already said yes in a dozen small ways. In the morning, the roads would be clear. The world would resume its faster clocks. She would pack her notes and her sensible shoes. He would check the boiler once more, because that is what men like him do when they leave. They would exchange numbers, written out with words for luck, and they would keep their careful promise to see what might be built with firewood and flour, and two people who believed at last that planning and faith could share the same room. For now, they stood on the quiet porch and let the cold sting their cheeks and the warmth hold their hands. Snow sighed softly on the railings. Somewhere inside, someone laughed in their sleep, and above them, the winter sky kept its own gentle story. One star beside another, each shining because the other did. The end. Thank you for listening to Moonlit Romantic. In the quiet of Pine Hollow Lodge, they learned that careful promises, made in the warm light of a winter's night, can be the ones that last the longest. If Snowed In With You brought you comfort tonight, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves a story where snow slows the world just enough for love to catch up until we meet again. Sleep softly, dream deeply, and remember, sometimes the best plans are the ones you never made.